It's now official that Thomas Partey's contract with Arsenal is finally done. It ended June the 30th. That was on Monday, and he is a free agent. But a lot of Arsenal fans are wondering what led to this impasse that failed the negotiations between the club and Thomas Partey's camp in regards to a new contract, and does the new sporting director at Arsenal in Andre Berta have anything to do with it whatsoever, because of his previous relationship with the player at Atletico de Madrid, where he did leave in 2020 to join Arsenal. Well, join me as we dive into that conversation, but more importantly, do subscribe to the channel. Welcome to the community. For those of you that are new on the channel, consider liking, leaving me a like on this video, but also subscribing if it's your first time here. And then also leave me a comment on your views about the topic of the day. So, it's quite unfortunate or even sad in my opinion, and in that regard I do speak with the voice of an Arsenal fan, to say the least, that Arsenal are losing Thomas Partey in the same window in which they've already lost Jorginho. Two experienced players that have been integral to their midfield in the last 3 seasons, in which they've gone on to finish second. Of course, there can be an argument against that, especially for Thomas Partey's involvement for the 2023-2024 campaign, in which he missed a whopping 24 Premier League games through injury. But that notwithstanding, we can all agree that Arsenal losing Thomas Partey and Jorginho in the same window is not an ideal situation, is an undesired, a kind of happening, one that will hurt or slice both sides. But I do know that there is a significant difference in opinion when it comes to Arsenal fans when in regards to Thomas Partey. Something he may as well leave, that it's okay, and the team will be better for it because of his injury record that saw him miss so many games at the club, more specifically in the Premier League and things of that nature. But what cannot be taken away from him is that last season he was Arsenal's best midfielder. Of course, he had some games in which you thought or felt that he did fall short, but overall, I do not think it is out of question that he was actually Arsenal's best midfielder, even better than Declan Rice, who many did vote to be Arsenal's player of the season, because Declan Rice, in the second part of the season, I thought he was a much better player as compared to the version of himself during the first phase of the season. That notwithstanding, I will take the conversation back because Thomas Partey did join Arsenal, I think, on deadline day in 2020 for the 2020-2021 season during COVID-19. We all remember that scenario when Arsenal agreed to pay his €50 million release clause to sign him from Atletico de Madrid. He eventually joined Arsenal, and he sort of had a difficult start to his Arsenal career. Now, 2 or 3 seasons in, of course, he did struggle with injuries. I think in the first 2 seasons at Arsenal, that's 2020-2021, 2021-2022, he missed at least 14 games in those 2 respective seasons, having made 24 appearances in the Premier League alone. That's what we are referring to here, through injury. And usually those injuries came at the most critical time of the season when, the club thought needed him the most. But also, he was learning his trade around the club. He was trying to acclimatize himself with the environment in the UK. He did speak about this, saying it's the hardest part of his professional for his professional career to move into a new country and settle in a country where you do not have friends, where you're thinking, how do you fit in family and things of that nature, and that you're not going to go on an evening out because you do not have friends. You're trying to also explore the new country and things of that nature. So eventually, it takes a bit of a toll on you, and sort of takes away a little bit of your concentration in your game as well, because you're worried about all these things. You're worried about the stability at home. You are worried about the environment. You're adapting to the food and everything that falls within that line. So I think the first 2 seasons could be excusable for him falling short in terms of overall performances. But even then, we still felt that there was a dynamite of a player in Thomas Partey. So come the 2022-2023 Premier League season, I think that's when everything clicked in place for Thomas Partey. I think he went on to make about 33 Premier League appearances that season. He was quite integral to Arsenal as Arsenal tried to push for a top finish. Now, again, Arsenal fell short, especially in the final stages of the season. I think we all remember them going away to White Hart Lane and lost to Tottenham Hotspurs, I think by 2-0. That Tottenham side that were under the charges of Antonio Conte and things of that nature. But also during that time, in the final, weeks of the season, that's when he also suffered another injury. Again, once again, to the frustration of us, of Arsenal fans who thought, every time we need him, that's when he gets injured. Now, the challenge with injuries is hardly can you blame the player for getting injured, because usually it's not their own making. It's not like they go out asking for injuries. These are unfortunate happenings. They are occupational hazards that do happen in the game. But Arsenal did not have sufficient coping mechanisms every time they lost Thomas Partey, and that's why it cost them. You remember when it happened to William Saliba, I think he got injured in that game against Sporting Lisbon in the UEFA Europa League. And then you remember Takehiro Tomiyasu also suffering an injury. And Arsenal's season was never the same because they lost significant players towards the tail end of the season. They ended up crashing out of the UEFA Europa League and even their own pursuits in the Premier League to finish within the top four, fell short. That very inexperienced side of, Emily Smith-Rowe, Bukayo Saka, Gabriel Martinelli, of course, Martin Odegaard in there, and things in that line, really. So, many Arsenal fans still felt hard done by that injury, that he wasn't available to help the team get it over the line and achieve, a top four finish and qualify for the UEFA Champions League. That notwithstanding, the team stuck up with him, and then we went into the 2023-2024 season, where you thought, okay, now he is matured, he has adapted well to the league, he is a very good player, he is being compared to the likes of Rodri, the likes of Casemiro, and things of that nature. And in the opinion of some, or many, I won't say majority because I do not speak for the majority, they would arguably say that he was the best holding midfielder in the country, while others say maybe he was second to Rodri and things of that nature. So if you want more on that, make reference to Alexander Zichenko's comments in regards to Thomas Partey. He has had the chance to play with both players, and he was saying Rodri is well suited to the way Manchester City play, while Thomas Partey, he thought, has an edge over Rodri overall. So, but anyway, those were views of Alexander Zichenko. So, during that campaign, in the 2022-2023 season, Arsenal really pushed hard. It was in his second season when Arsenal pushed to finish within the top four. That was in 2021-2022 season. I remember the previous season, Arsenal had finished 8th, and now they are trying to finish within the top four. Of course, and things didn't really go their way. They were trying to really push for that. Thomas Partey had been injured, and because of that injury, he was not available to help the team get it over the line. And then came the subsequent season, which was 2022-2023, when Arsenal ended up finishing second at the expense of Manchester City, who snatched away the Premier League title, despite Arsenal leading the table for majority of the days of the Premier League season. Again, because of the injuries that they did suffer at the tail end of the season, and then sort of collapsed away with the kinds of draws that they entertained against teams like West Ham, against Southampton, didn't really help. But again, Thomas Partey missed a certain phase in that season that sort of you thought he would have been more helpful to the team had he been available. To avoid any sorts of confusions whatsoever, it was during the 2022-2023 season when Arsenal first finished second. And that season, that's when he made the 33 appearances. But because he got injured at the tail end of the season, for those of you that do remember, they missed him for that final bit. And then they thought, okay, we've fallen short because of our lack of experience, because Partey got injured and among other few key players in the season, and we sort of let ourselves down and we missed out on the Premier League title. But we'll go back again and fight again. Now came the 2023-2024 season. You thought Arsenal were going to give it a whole go at it. And indeed they did give a go at it. But still, during that campaign, he went on to miss 24 games through injury because he managed only 14 appearances in as far as the Premier League alone was concerned. I think that was the season he got injured the most. So much to the anger of Arsenal fans. I do remember for me who does follow some of their forums, saying they need to get rid of him. He's always unavailable and things of that nature. And at the time, it was really hard to disagree with them. And I do get the feeling that many, Arsenal players did share those sentiments because they felt that they needed to replace him because of his recurring injury issues that get him unavailable at the most critical of times. So it was really, really hard to argue against that. And the club said, we'll stick with him, as he entered the final year of his contract, which was then 2024-2025 Premier League season. And then that's when he made the most Premier League appearances in a season ever since he joined Arsenal. Went on to make 35 Premier League appearances, scored the most goals, which was 4, provided 2 assists, which gave him an overall goal involvement of 6. So last season in itself was essentially his best season in an Arsenal jersey in terms of availability, in terms of overall contribution. Across the entire season, he played up to more than 50 games. So, but at the start of the season, given his previous injury record, I think Arsenal were telling to themselves, because there had been some bit of interest from Saudi Pro League clubs prior to the start of the season, although there was no firmed up interest in trying to sign him, and that's why he ended up staying. But at the start of the season, Arsenal knew that come the end of the season, we're probably parting ways with Thomas Partey because of his injury challenges. And he went on to have arguably the best season. And that's how Arsenal sort of changed their mind and said, okay, given how he's performed this season, given his availability this season, maybe we should consider giving him a 1-year contract extension, and then perhaps with an option to extend for a further year as we further assess our other options in the market. They knew that we were really, really trying to push for Martin Zubimendi, because they did initiate those talks at the time when they were concluding a deal for Mikel Merino to join from Real Sociedad and things of that nature. So Mikel Arteta comes out to say, we want to keep Thomas Partey and we will entertain contract talks. So they went into contract talks, and now the reports indicate that apparently the player and his camp wanted a slight increase on his wages, given the kind of performance or display that he had managed to offer during the course of the campaign, contrary to what Arsenal had wanted to offer or were willing to offer. At some stage, we were hearing reports that Arsenal thought that he would even be willing to take a bit of a pay cut to stay at the club, while other reports suggested that Arsenal were only willing to offer him the wages on which he was already on, to try and retain him for another season, and perhaps or 2 or even 2 if possible. That contract offer was sent. There was apparently no response to either object or accept the offer until Arsenal felt that time was wearing out for them, because then it meant there is a possibility of losing him while they needed to act fast to find a replacement for him, and that's why they made a move for Christian Nogard. But the reason as to why I will bring Andre Berta in this conversation is because he was a sporting director at Atletico Madrid, where Thomas Partey had been. Now, having signed for the senior team, it was about 3-4 years in, and he was one of, if not the lowest paid players at the senior team. Now, his agent, he was really, really pushing the team for a new contract talks to improve on his wages, and it came to a point where they had to chase his agent away from certain offices, from accessing them, because he had become a thorn in the foot. He had become a small stone in the foot, when it came to demanding for a new contract for his player, saying that, he's been improving year in, year out for the last 3-4 years, and yet his contract has not been revised. He's been under the same contract. Now, Thomas Partey goes on to say that he had expected to leave the club after the 2017-2018 season, when they went on to play Arsenal, I think at the semi-finals of the UEFA Europa League, before they went to the final and won that trophy. So there had been exploratory talks, but nothing really came good of that. And during the going back and forth between the agent, the sporting director, that's Andre Berta, the head coach or manager, that's Diego Simeone, they had held conversations. Now this is 2 years in front about contract renewal talks. having the player improve his wages and things of that nature. So eventually the club came around to it and they were willing to significantly improve his wages. He was really, really okay with the offer put on the table, but there was one key issue that was found contentious. He does speak of a message sent to him by the Atletico de Madrid president, because once they did agree on the new contract terms, on the new contract, the way it was, he had to have a final say from the club president, which then he sort of gave a green light on. And once he gave that green light, there was one other issue to iron out. It had to do with the agent's commission or fees, because they were only willing to give his agent only 3%, yet it is believed that it is standard practice that agents get a 10%. So they had the chat with the president, and he eventually told him, unless you're giving my agent a 3%, I'm not signing the new contract, and then I'll be interested in leaving the club. And then he was told, look, there's no team that is going to be interested in buying you. Arsenal were interested the other time, but look, they're not in the Champions League. They're not a good team, and no one is willing in this kind of environment to pay 50 million euros and that kind of thing. So Thomas Partey gets on a call with his agent and tells his agent, can you get on the phone with Arsenal? We need to see if we can do a move. Gets on the phone with Arsenal, and this was with only a day left to the close of the transfer window. So the agent calls Arsenal, and on the other side, they are congratulating him on having this player sign a new contract, because that was the kind of information being passed around, that Thomas Partey had signed a new contract, which was contrary to the truth. So Thomas Partey tells Arsenal, no, I've not signed a new contract, and Arsenal, work on the paperwork, pay the release clause, which was 50 million euros, and on final day, with about an hour left to the close of the window, Thomas Partey becomes an Arsenal player. So that was the backdrop to all of it. But Andrea Berta is in the mix of it all. He does not really cite him as a person to blame, because he said it had an issue with the president, because he went on to make a suggestion whether he can pay the other 7% to his agent out of his own money, and he was advised it is a matter of principle and not, he was not able to do that. So that's how he said, even if Arsenal are not giving me a contract as good as the one that Atletico Madrid were giving me, that even if Arsenal are putting me on a lesser pay, I'll be able to join them for as long as they agree to pay you your 10%. So he basically stuck out for his agent to say, if he doesn't get what is deserved of him, then I'm not staying. And that's how he made the switch to Arsenal. Now, fast forward, we get into contract talks. Andre Berta has joined as sporting director to Arsenal in March. He's confirmed, and then he has to entertain contract talks with Thomas Partey and the player's agent. Now, the relationship between Thomas Partey's agent and Andre Berta, given the historical context at Atletico Madrid, it's safe to say, I think, it was a bit salty, and maybe this was sort of bound to happen. But do remember, it was not Andre Berta the only one involved in these contract negotiations. There must have been other top club officials, including Mikel Arteta, because he gets to have a say in these contract negotiations. Not in the letter of details, but in terms of his convincing the player in regards to the future of the project and things of that nature, in regards to his overall vision of the player and where he thinks he wants him to play and how he fits well going forward within the team. So he is involved in that. But I think when it came to, Andrea Berta dealing with Thomas Partey's agent, maybe he wasn't also willing to budge. Although you get the feeling that if maybe it had been another figure in that chair, maybe they would have been willing to budge on certain demands, either from the player's side or to try and convince Thomas Partey otherwise, because he had said it was up to his agent and the club to reach an agreement, because for him all he loved was to be on the pitch and play football. So is Andrea Berta to blame for Thomas Partey leaving Arsenal because of failed contract negotiations? I certainly do not want to put it entirely on his shoulders, because I would want to believe that contract talks had been initiated even before he did join as sporting director. Now, it was, of course, his responsibility to get a deal over the line, but because of that bit of salty relationship between the players, agents, and himself, that dates back to Atletico Madrid, I thought must have played a factor, however small or big, at what extent that we do not entirely know, must have been a factor at some point to that failed these contract negotiations to go through, and now that Thomas Partey eventually has to leave Arsenal. So do let me know, guys, what you think on those issues on that topic, and whether you do think that Andrea Berta has a hand in Thomas Partey's leaving, or it's entirely on the club, or those that came before Andre Berta, maybe Thomas Partey and that kind of thing, that he also has a part to play, because we've seen thoughts that the club was patient with him when he was suffering all these kinds of injuries, and they did not put him up for sale. And yet, when it came to the simplest of margins to say, give us one more last chance with you, he sort of said, no, unless you meet, it's either the highway or I move out. That you either meet my terms or I'm leaving. And it boiled down to that, and he eventually has left. Do let me know what your thoughts are down in the comment section. And if you're new to the channel, do not forget to subscribe. And I'll see you next time. Stay blessed and have yourselves a wonderful rest of the month. Bye-bye.